so it needs to be invested in, obviously, or reinvested in.
Another one here, I call the gap between my front teeth the poverty gap, as I have never been able to afford dentistry. Most of my dental problems originated from trainee dental students in Wellington being let loose on my teeth during the 60s and 70s, left with eggshells full of black metal, which slowly but surely fell apart, says Andrew. So, look, thank you so much for your response on that. We had such a huge response, and I'm sure that we'll return to the topic of it, dental care, whether we can afford it or not. And moving along into the Friday mailbag, what else do we have? The issues of those with disabilities, particularly getting around in their own home. We had Dr. Huhana Hickey with us on the panel this week, and as a wheelchair user was familiar with these issues. Dr. Hickey was saying, look, I can't even to this day get into a room or two because it's just corridors too tight. You can't turn around. Kitchen's not friendly to those with wheelchairs. And someone here, named withheld in Hawke's Bay, says, Kia ora Wallace, Kāinga Ora, housing limitations with disabilities. I'm a social worker with the elderly, and they are also struggling. They have increased falls and are often not bathing because their houses and bathrooms need modifying. Besides the fact that this is inhuman and humiliating, increased hospitalisations are costly. So thank you for that. And if it was dentistry, which was the biggest topic of the week, the next biggest, not by far, was gardening, and whether or not it is shaming people to say, hey, grow your own veggies, or actually is it just common sense? And Rochelle says, if you have enough time to tend veggies garden, then all the better. But most people don't have the luxury of time to do that these days. Here is my attempt at growing carrots one year. Looking really promising above the ground, the result was so dismal, it totally put me off. It is so much easier to buy a bag for $3 from the supermarket. So I took the liberty of emailing both Alan and Jenny this picture of these really miserable looking carrots. They don't look good, but the leaf, the top part does. Jenny.
I know, it's so disappointing. Explicitly, I try and grow vegetables. I tend to stick with lettuce and tomatoes because they tend to be the safest, although my tomatoes this year were dreadful. But it's like, yeah, it's a great idea that we should all grow our own vegetables. But the reality is that they often don't turn out looking like the ones in the supermarket.
Try harder. Do some research, do some homework.
Yeah, I have this thing called a job and a life and a family, and, sorry, I just think I fail in that department.
Yeah, I mean, that photo, they were hard to recognise as carrots, really.
Did you see?
It's like some mutant bloody orange vegetable, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It is a time thing, really. If you're going to make a go of growing vegetables, then you really do need to put the time and the effort into it, and that's becoming a
We'll come back. We'll do this on Monday. We'll get a gardener to tell us how hard it can be to just put a simple plot down, a bit of compost, and there you go. Surely you can grow better carrots than what I've seen just right here in the picture of the shelf. I rent, and luckily the landlord agreed to let me put up some raised garden beds in, but garden is not easy, and it's definitely not cheap, especially if you need to buy and make garden beds and soil. Often the soil in the backyard is not good quality for growing. Mine, mostly sand, and soil is quite expensive. Sarah says, Wallace, my partner is an amazing gardener. He's about to retire and he's looking for something to do. I think that if any of your listeners want someone to show them, to build their confidence and knowledge of how to grow a garden, where and when to plant things, he will be great. He's very patient and he's a good listener. He can organise planter boxes for anyone renting or who has limited space, says Sarah. Sarah, if you listen to this afternoon, can you please email me, thepanel@rnz.co.nz, because I would like to get in touch with your amazing gardener partner. So that'd be a lovely job in the retired years, maybe even as an affordable garden consultant, Jenny, someone like this person who could go to your place and say, here's how you do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I have a
All
veggie
right.
pod. I am quite committed to this idea. It just doesn't actually turn out that well.
No. Okay. And regarding timekeeping, are you a timekeeper or are you a time bender? Do you like to be on time or do you like to be a little bit late? Or you just end up being late? Wallace says T in Wellington, I was forced to run half an hour early to many things as a child and I loathe wasted time. As an adult, I try hard to be no more than a couple of minutes early. I often fail. I appreciate that some people consider punctuality a matter of respect. I would counter that by saying that flexibility and acceptance is just as valuable. Kia ora to that. That's a lovely email, and thank you so much for your correspondence this afternoon. And by the way, we are being overrun, literally overrun by quotes from the castle. It's extraordinary, isn't it, how popular it is. Chris says, my favourite quote, what's this, Dale? With reference to the icing cake on the icing on the cake. Anyway, time for I've been Machine Morton.
I've been thinking about Madeleine Albright, who passed away on Wednesday, aged 84. And as we all probably know, she was the first woman to be appointed Secretary of State in the US, and she was appointed by Bill Clinton in 1997. And I was about 30 at the time, and I think it really, resonated with me that this was a woman stepping into a very powerful position, something that hadn't been done before, and it was really important. She was an amazing woman. She was a feminist in the true sense of the word. She believed in equal rights for women and equality for all, and she was a huge supporter of other women. Her personal motto, which is often quoted but I don't think it's always attributed to her, was, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And prior to being Secretary of State, she was the US ambassador to the United Nations. And at the time, she was one of only 6 female permanent representatives on the United Nations out of 183. And those women worked together and lobbied for women's rights around the world and were actually instrumental in getting rape declared as a weapon of war and that it was a crime against humanity. She, when you admire someone like that, like I Googled her because you think, maybe there were controversies that I don't remember. But there really weren't. There was, she was criticised for their sanctions against Iraq and the impact that had on the Iraqi people.
She certainly was, Jimmy.
Yeah. But she admitted that was a terrible mistake. But apart from that, there wasn't scandal and controversy around her. She was a role model for women. She was a glass ceiling breaker. She was much admired. And I think this other quote really sums her up really well, especially for women who might be struggling to have be heard in their role, and it took me a long time to develop a voice, and now that I have it, I'm not going to be silent. So I've been thinking about her and feeling a little bit sad about the loss of such a wonderful woman.
Thank you so much. Jimmy Morton there. I've been thinking. Alan Blackman.
Well, Wallace, I think last time I was on, I was busy bemoaning the fact that the word kilometre is often mispronounced. It's kilometre, and sadly I'm still hearing that on national radio, so obviously the message hasn't got through, so I thought, what the heck, seeing we're going to be talking about literacy later on today, I thought I would...
reinforce it?
Reinforce it, yeah. Come up with a series of my bugbears in terms of bad English usage. So, bear with me, it's going to be quick. So, you've sent me an invite? No, you've sent me an invitation. Invite to
come on!
You're going to redouble your efforts.
Absolutely
You're going to redouble your efforts. No, you're not. You're going to quadruple your efforts, for God's sake. No such thing as redoubling. Just the same thing. There's no such thing as reimagining. You can imagine, don't reimagine. You haven't got a skill set, for goodness sake. You've got skills, okay? And most certainly, upskill is not a proper word. Texted is the word. I texted him, her, whatever. Not a text, okay? Everyone says that it's bad. Leverage, please. Leverage is a noun. It's not a verb. Same with staircase. Staircase is a noun. It's not a verb. Lots of people say verses, or they just say verse now instead of persons. Impact. Impact is a noun. It's not a verb. And there's a terrible word, impactful, that gets used. Wellness is a bad word. Learning is an awful word.
Whoa. I don't send you an invite. I don't send you an invite.
No, you send me an invitation. An invitation is the noun. Invite is a verb. You invite someone. A narrative, no. A story, it's better. A pin number or a rack test,
Good
no.
Enough.
It's not.
Good handle.
Tapalafalahi atu Ampaniwai with a bulletin of news and sport from RNZ Pacific. Australian officials are concerned about a leaked security agreement between China and Solomon Islands. The document, which was first published online by an advisor to the Malaysia Premier, Daniel Sudani, says Solomon Islands may request China to send police and military personnel to Honiara. The Australian government has expressed its concern with the draft, saying the Pacific family is able to provide security assistance itself. Defence and Security Senior Lecturer Anna Palms told RNZ Pacific if it's genuine, it's a serious concern.
There are still questions around its authenticity, but if it is authentic, that raises some serious questions. And if it's not authentic, then it also provides some interesting insights into the way in which the geopolitical dynamic is playing out domestically in Australia.
Dr. Pauls says the document suggests that logistical support would be provided for Chinese ships' visits to Solomon Islands. A former prisoner of Manus Island says the backdown by the Australian government allowing refugees to resettle in New Zealand is a huge relief. New Zealand will welcome 450 asylum seekers held in Australian detention centres over the next 3 years. Kurdish journalist Beiruz Buchani, who is now based in New Zealand, says many of the detainees have been imprisoned for nearly a decade.
It's a huge relief for refugees, for their families, and also for people who have been fighting against this system.
People were dehumanised under the Australian system. Meanwhile, the Australian-based Refugee Action Coalition says the deal exposes what it calls the abject cruelty of Australia's processing regime. Initially, the deal will cover those held on Nauru or in Australia for regional processing. Refugee Action Coalition spokesperson Ian Wintall says anyone who wants to should be allowed to permanently stay in Australia. He says the exclusion of refugees in Papua New Guinea, who he claims have suffered even worse torture than those in Nauru, is a kick in the teeth for those refugees. The Northern Marianas has confirmed the island's 32nd COVID-19 related death. There are currently 133 active cases in the Commonwealth and 7 individuals are in hospital. 12 additional people have also been confirmed positive for COVID, bringing the total to just under 11,000 cases since March 2020. COVID-19 has reached Tonga's Hapa group of islands for the first time, with 29 positive cases in quarantine. They were among 126 people who arrived on a repatriation vessel from the main island of Tongatapu. The Minister of Health, Saya Pukala, reported the events in an official COVID update yesterday. He says all the passengers were evacuees returning to Hapa 2 months after January's eruption.
126 people from Hawaii have been returned to Hawaii and are in isolation for 5 days. They were isolated for 5 days while they waited for the ferry in Tongatapu. 29 were tested positive.
Saya Pukala says that there have been so far 3 COVID deaths in the kingdom. Meanwhile, Tongan police say they've made 315 arrests for lockdown breaches between February 2nd and Tuesday. 178 people were arrested for breaking curfew times, while 147 were arrested for not wearing masks and breaking social distancing rules. Australia's Ministry of Health has confirmed 126 new community cases have been reported in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of community cases detected since March 17th to 748, with the bulk of those on Ebola. A total of 14,433 rapid antigen tests have been administered as of yesterday. Day 3 of New Zealand's Festival of Pacific Culture, Holy Fest, is underway at the Manukau Sports Bowl in Auckland. Our reporter Lydia Lewis is there.
The smell of fish donuts is in the air, but there are no spectators here to eat them. Actually, performers. The event is the largest of its kind in the world, and includes 30 farms and 1,000. They're putting on students at the province of cameras, and the families are having around phones, computers and TVs to watch. Performances at the farm on stage have just kicked off. Students will go behind sports to be here, appearing their hearts out in song and dance, vying for one of the highly contested trophies, which has been around for 47 years.